Hello again and a warm welcome back. I hope this video finds you in good health. During the previous chapter I had controversially highlighted some interesting connections between the Nazis and the antagonist from Silent Hill 2, the enigmatic Pyramid Head monster. I'd shown how his attire, consisting of black boots and apron, may be artistically symbolic of the butchers of the Holocaust. Again, this must be taken into some consideration given that the design of his iconic helmet had been influenced by the Nazis' Königstiger tank, and that his weapon, a scissor blade, is an item frequently associated with the legacy of the Holocaust. During this video, we're going to be taking a closer look at Pyramid Head's creator, Masahiro Ito, who was also the art director for Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3. Herein, we will discuss both his interest in World War II and the Holocaust, and reveal a familial link to a certain race of people who were historically persecuted by the Nazis. We'll then also move on to discuss Mr. Ito's all-time favourite artist, and show how this artist was also influenced by the Nazis and the Holocaust. Before we do that though, I want to quickly summarise the Holocaust, because most of you, just like me, will likely have been failed by your country's education system. The Holocaust is the collective term that is used to describe the attempted Nazi-led genocide of the European Jews between 1933 and 1945. Following their dramatic rise to power in early 1933, the Nazis would almost immediately begin about their persecution and segregation of German Jews from the rest of society. Anti-Semitic propaganda, boycotts of Jewish businesses, and expulsion from holding influential civic jobs soon followed, and just 2 years later, in 1935, the Nazis would pass the infamous Nuremberg Laws, a racial purity test that would essentially strip the German Jews of not only their rights, but also of their citizenship. This, of course, would leave them effectively stateless and vulnerable to further discrimination. It duly followed. 3 years later, in November 1938, the persecution of the German Jews would take a dramatic, sickening twist. All over Nazi Germany and recently annexed Austria, Jewish businesses were destroyed, synagogues were set alight, and Jews were roundly beaten and killed in the streets during 2 nights of frenzied violence that came to be infamously known as Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. The German Jews, of course, weren't the only targets of the Nazi propaganda machine. Earlier, shortly after their acquisition of power in early 1933, the Nazis would begin opening their infamous concentration camps. Soon after, those who had been dubbed by the Nazi regime as undesirables were interred, including violent criminals, sexual deviants, socialists, communists, and any other enemies of the Nazi state. Later, after the outbreak of World War II, the Nazis began segregating Jewish communities in neighbouring Poland by removing them from their homes and relocating them into ghettos, such as this one in Krakow. A quick bit of trivia for you here. Disgraced film director Roman Polanski was a child in the Krakow ghetto. He was allegedly the first man approached to direct Schindler's List, but felt that he wasn't ready to revisit this traumatic moment. Anyways, getting back on track. A couple of years later, following the 1941 Nazi invasion of the former Soviet Union, the Jews of Eastern Europe would come to experience an altogether new level of Nazi depravity. The Einsatzgruppen, the Nazis' goon squad, would soon become the early perpetrators of the Holocaust as they stormed into towns and villages to round up both the local Jewish population and the intelligentsia. These defenceless victims would soon be summarily executed by Nazi firing squads and then buried within mass graves. A short time thereafter, with the increasing death toll in mind and the trauma that it was extolling upon the executioners, the Nazis decided that they needed more efficient ways to carry out their ethnic cleansings. Various ideas were soon trialled, including the use of dynamite to blow up the bodies of their victims, but it was swiftly decided that gassing would be the quickest, cleanest, cheapest form of execution. This would begin with the advent of gas fans, but swiftly move on to the development of the most horrific remnant of the Holocaust, the gas chambers of the notorious Nazi death camps, where Soviet prisoners of war, Jews, Slavs, Roma, Sinti, invalids, and children would soon come to be murdered. We'll come back to discuss these gas chambers later, as there might be several references to them in Silent Hill 2. Finally, before moving on, I just want to give you some figures here. In totality, it is estimated that more than 10 million people were murdered during the Holocaust, with Jewish victims making up at least 60% of this total. Entire families were simply erased from history. Okay, so you may be wondering here what kind of connections I can possibly form between Silent Hill 2 art director Masahiro Ito and the Holocaust, beyond a general interest in the subject, of course. So the first thing that I want to bring to your attention is this tweet from Mr. Ito, which highlights a recent trip to Babi Yar in Kyiv, Ukraine. Babi Yar was the site of the worst massacre in the Holocaust outside of the notorious death camps, where in the space of just a couple of days, some 30,000 people were murdered by the Nazis. Again, this trip to visit a Holocaust memorial could easily be explained away as dark tourism. Heck, I've been to a number of these memorials myself, but there might be an additional layer of reasoning to this visit, because it turns out that Mr. Ito, a Japanese national, is in fact of Slavic descent, through his great-grandmother, I believe. The Slavic people were of course targeted by the Nazis because they had been historically portrayed as being Untermensch, or subhuman, by the so-called Aryan master race, and had historically counted in the hundreds of thousands among the victims of Nazi barbarism. Recall again here that I'd stated that Mr. Ito was the creator of the iconic Pyramid Head monster. Is it merely a metaphorical, artistic representation of Mr. Ito's fears of Nazism? It is also worth mentioning that Mr. Ito is a fan of the extravagant, perhaps decadent 1920s era of the Weimar Republic, which was swiftly dismantled, of course, when the ultra-conservative Nazis had seized power during the early 1930s. Finally, for this chapter, let's investigate Mr. Ito's favourite artist, someone who was also heavily inspired by the Nazis and the Holocaust, and had earlier spent some time living in Berlin, where he got to see the wicked Nazis up close. So, who could it be that had provided most inspiration to Mr. Ito's warped, wild imagination? Could it be Picasso, Van Gogh, Rembrandt, maybe even Salvador Dali? Nope, it happens to be this guy, famed Irish surrealist artist Francis Bacon. Mr. Bacon's art was also heavily inspired by the Holocaust, at least according to a close friend who had posthumously noted the fascination he had with the grotesqueries found by the soldiers who had earlier liberated the death camps. Earlier, in the late 1920s, Mr. Bacon would factually spend a few months living in Berlin, and the political infighting between the far-left communists and the far-right Nazis would certainly have left some mark on his conscience. Mr. Bacon's art would also go on to have a considerable influence upon Masahiro Ito, and we can see this reflected in the design of some of the monsters in the Silent Hill franchise. We will return to talk about these so-called monsters later, as they might also be connected to the game's possible hidden sub-narrative Holocaust-related story. Okay, so that's it for this video. During the next one, we will be discussing some other Holocaust-related art. My aim there is to show you that my claim that there might be possible references to the tragedy of the Holocaust here in Silent Hill shouldn't come to you as any surprise. It's factually one of the world's most popular topics for artistic inspiration, yes, even within the video game industry. If you're left wondering how the next video connects back to Silent Hill, we will also be looking at a recent video game that one of the lead Silent Hill artists had worked on for a studio that would later go on to develop the remake of Silent Hill 2 in 2024. All will be revealed in the next video. I'll see you there. Thanks for watching, take care, and goodbye.